Money doesn't come to those who wait. It never has. It doesn't care about your dreams. It doesn't hear your prayers. It doesn't reward the ones who sit still hoping the world will change on their behalf. It comes, instead, to those who decide, who rise early, not to rush, but to align, who look at the world with a certain clarity, not of what they want, but of who they must become to receive it. Waiting is passive. It is a quiet form of avoidance. It wears the mask of patience, but it is fear in disguise. A fear of failure, a fear of change, a fear of responsibility. To wait is to delay your potential in the name of imaginary timing. It is to assume that time owes you something, that the universe is keeping track of your wishes. It's not, because time is indifferent. Like nature, like money, you think you are waiting for the right moment. But the truth is, the moment has always been yours to name. The world doesn't need your wish. It needs your will. That moment when you stop saying maybe and say now. That is the moment money starts to move. Not because the money heard you, but because you heard you. Because for the first time, your actions and your identity are no longer in conflict. You are no longer pretending to want something while doing nothing to receive it. You are no longer waiting to be lucky. You are building yourself into someone that luck can't ignore. This is the essence of decision. Not loud, not impulsive, but deliberate, silent, stoic. A quiet strike of lightning that splits your old self from your new one. And in that split, you stop asking, how do I become successful? Instead, you ask, what am I willing to suffer for? What am I willing to be consistent about, even when it's boring, even when it's silent, even when it's slow? This is what people miss. They think wealth is about doing something brilliant, flashy, viral. No, wealth is not a result of a moment. It's the compounding of small decisions made by someone who stopped waiting. It is the reward of the one who chose to become useful to the world, to others, to a system. Money is energy, stored and measured. If you want more of it, provide more energy, more clarity, more solutions, more courage. But none of this is possible while you are still waiting. Waiting for motivation, waiting for a mentor, waiting for a sign. These are all shadows, excuses in elegant disguise. You are not stuck. You are not unlucky. You have not missed your shot. You just haven't decided yet. The man who has decided walks differently. He may not speak more, but he wastes less. He may not know all the steps, but he's already taken the first one, and that makes all the difference. Because clarity is louder than talent. Direction is stronger than raw energy, and commitment is always more powerful than potential. The man who decides does not know when he will succeed. He only knows that he will, or he will die trying. There is no plan B. Not because he's reckless, but because he's focused. Decision gives birth to discipline. Discipline gives birth to momentum. Momentum compounds into results. And results attract the very thing you once waited for. So, yes, money comes. But it doesn't come as a reward. It comes as a reflection. A reflection of the clarity you chose, the work you honored, the self-respect you built. You cannot receive value from the world while still avoiding responsibility for your own development. You must outgrow the part of you that needs permission to begin. No more advice. No more seeking. No more self-help loops. You are not confused. You are afraid. And that's okay. But fear must not be your master. You must act anyway, not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. You think waiting is safer, but waiting is slow death. It is the soul decaying behind the illusion of comfort. The Stoics taught this with their lives. They faced exile. They faced war. They faced death itself, calmly, deliberately. And here you are, facing a decision to create, to build, to own your path, to stop waiting for life to grant you permission to be who you already are. Capable, responsible, powerful. There is a reason you felt uneasy lately. It's not burnout. It's not confusion. It's your deeper self trying to emerge, while your surface self clings to the comfort of indecision. Kill the noise. Silence the world for a moment. Ask yourself, not what you want, but what you're willing to do for it. What you're willing to become. Let that answer drive everything. Let that decision rearrange your habits, your priorities, your actions. Not tomorrow. Now. The man who decides doesn't become rich overnight. But overnight, he becomes different. You can feel it. In the posture. In the gaze. In the calm, measured breath of someone who knows where they are going. Even if no one else sees it yet. He no longer asks if it will work. He asks, how long can I hold the line? How long can I act with integrity when no one is watching? How long can I remain focused when results are slow? How long can I endure rejection without letting it define me? Because this is where wealth begins. Not on screens, not in trends, not in hype, but in silence. In early mornings, when it's just you and the decision you made. To not be ordinary, to not drift, to not lie to yourself one more day. This is how wealth is built. 1 hour at a time, one page, one phone call, one silent battle won deep within. So no, money doesn't come to those who wait. It comes to those who decide. Fade into title screen. Money only comes when you decide. Would you like this text in script format, with visual directions, pacing, and music suggestions? Everyone wants money. That part is obvious. You don't need to teach a man to desire more comfort, more freedom, more power, or more security. The hunger is already there. It grows in silence, fed by images, expectations, comparisons, and the subtle lies of advertising. But here's the truth no one says aloud. Wanting means nothing. It is the lowest form of energy. A flicker, a phantom, a whisper in a room full of noise. Wanting is easy. It's effortless. It costs you nothing. It lets you pretend you're moving when you're not. It gives the illusion of momentum, like pedaling a bike with no chain. You feel busy. You feel alive. But you're going nowhere. Wanting is not the problem. The illusion that wanting alone will get you there. That's the real trap. Because most people want money the way they want to be fit, or famous, or free. They want the result, not the cost. The outcome, not the path. They want the fruit, but they refuse to tend the tree. This is not a decision. This is not clarity. This is escapism dressed in ambition. To want money is passive. It is the mental equivalent of scrolling through your own imagination. It feels good. It makes you feel like something is happening. But when you wake up the next morning, nothing has changed. And that's the difference. Wanting is internal noise. Decision is internal order. The man who has decided doesn't spend all day thinking about success. He spends all day aligning his life toward it. He is building, removing, adjusting. His focus is not on more. His focus is on better. He is not seduced by vague desires. He is driven by clear direction. This is the separation between the many who want and the few who have. Wanting is a dream. Decision is a discipline. Wanting is a thought. Decision is a transformation. Wanting is effortless. Decision is expensive. Because the moment you decide, you are no longer just a spectator in your own life. You are the architect. And architecture is not poetry. It's blood, sweat, repetition, and rejection. It's waking up earlier than you want to, doing what you don't feel like doing, and letting go of the people who hold you back from becoming who you could be. To decide is to become incompatible with your old self. And this is what most people cannot stomach. So they go back to wanting. Wanting is soft. It's warm. It lets you feel powerful without requiring change. You can sit in a cafe and say, I want to be rich. And the world will nod politely. Your friends will agree. Your ego will clap. But in reality, nothing is happening. There's no cost, no risk, no direction, no danger. But decision is lonely. It does not need applause. It does not tolerate excuses. It does not wait for the weather to be right. It simply begins, quietly, deliberately, even when no one else understands. Because decision is not about what you feel. It's about what you will. The Stoics knew this well. Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. We waste our time in wanting, in imagining futures we never pursue, in talking about paths we never walk, in admiring wealth from a distance, while remaining emotionally married to comfort. We waste our time in hesitation, in distraction, in daydreams that require no risk and no rejection. We waste our time wanting when we could have been deciding. Look around. The world is full of people who say they want to be wealthy, but everything in their life says otherwise. Their habits, their inputs, their priorities, their fears. They spend more time looking rich than becoming rich. They talk more about someday than about what now. They are loyal to the illusion of effort, but allergic to actual cost. And what is that cost? It is the cost of change, the cost of clarity, the cost of saying, I will no longer be who I've been. It is the cost of trade-offs, the cost of boredom, the cost of walking forward alone, long before the world claps for you, if it ever does. To decide is to accept that you will lose people, comfort, and approval on the way to gaining yourself. That's why so few decide. They want to be rich and liked. They want to be wealthy and unchanged. They want to have it all, without letting go of anything. But reality doesn't work like that. The Stoic doesn't cling to comfort. He doesn't serve his emotions. He doesn't beg the world to make it easier. He makes himself stronger. Because money, real money, does not come to the man who sits back, waiting for the world to recognize his potential. It comes to the man who has stopped asking, stopped dreaming, and started doing. It comes to the man who says, I will create value. I will bring solutions. I will act in alignment with my highest self, regardless of how I feel today. That is not a wish. That is a decision. And that kind of man, that kind of woman, becomes magnetic, not because of magic, but because the world is starving for people who know who they are and act accordingly. When you move with clarity, people feel it. When you move with certainty, resistance loses its power. And when you move without waiting, money notices. Because money is not mystical. It is a mirror. It reflects back the structure, the value, and the discipline you bring to the world. You don't earn it by wanting. You earn it by deciding. Wanting says, I hope. Decision says, I will. Wanting waits. Decision moves. Wanting consumes. Decision creates. You are not broke because you lack desire. You are broke, or stuck, or frustrated because your desire has not matured into decision. But you can change that. In this very moment. Right now, you don't need more time. You need more truth. You don't need more goals. You need more courage. The courage to become consistent. The courage to outgrow distractions. The courage to stop performing for approval and start acting from principle. The Stoic doesn't wait to feel motivated. He doesn't wait to be understood. He doesn't wait for the stars to align. He aligns himself internally and moves forward, one quiet decision at a time. You are capable of this, but you must let go of the illusion, the beautiful lie that wanting is enough. It's not. It never was. Decide who you must become. Then become that person in action, not just intention. Do it now, and watch the world quietly respond, not to your dreams, but to your decisions. A real decision burns bridges. It doesn't leave back doors unlocked. It doesn't write a second ending. It doesn't entertain the thought, if this doesn't work, I'll just go back to who I was. It removes the escape routes. It traps you inside your highest potential and then throws away the key. Because decision, real decision, is not about trying. It's not about testing the waters. It's not about dipping your toe in, seeing how you feel, and deciding later if you want to stay. It's about burning the ships. The story goes like this. A general arrives on foreign shores, outnumbered, with everything against him. His men are nervous. Some think of retreat. But the general does something no one expects. He burns the boats they arrived on. He tells his soldiers, we win, or we die. There is no other path. And they win, not because of luck, not because of better weapons, but because when all other options are gone, focus becomes absolute. Distraction dies, doubt dies, and only one thing remains, the task. This is the power of true decision. It does not leave room for hesitation. It eliminates maybe. It transforms I'll try into I will. And most importantly, it demands the death of the person you were before it was made. Because that's what most people are really afraid of. Not the work, not the risk, but the loss of their old identity, the version of themselves that was allowed to stay small, to wait, to want without doing. That version dies the moment a real decision is made. And that's why so few make it. Most people live with options. They love options. They seek them. They keep them open, just in case. But options are anchors. They weigh down your mind. They distract your focus. They allow failure to become tolerable, even logical. They whisper things like, if this doesn't work, at least I still have plan B. If this gets hard, I can always go back. If I fail, I'll just say I wasn't that serious about it anyway. But that's not a decision. That's a negotiation. That's a stall tactic. That's fear disguised as strategy. True decision, Stoic decision, is violent. It is surgical. It is cold. Not because it lacks emotion, but because it refuses to be ruled by emotion. It says, this is what I will do. This is who I must become. And I will remove anything or anyone that weakens my resolve. It is a form of self-respect. To decide means you trust yourself enough to follow through, even when it's hard, even when it's slow, even when no one is watching. You trust yourself to stay. That's what commitment is. It's staying. In discomfort, in boredom, in silence, in resistance, in rejection, in confusion. You stay because you've decided. And when the decision is real, there is no room left to run. That's the test. If you still need encouragement, your decision is not yet complete. If you still seek approval, your decision is still shaky. If you still need perfect conditions, your decision is still conditional. But when it's real, it no longer depends on circumstances. You don't need proof. You don't need applause. You don't need momentum. You just move. You wake up and you act, not because you feel like it, but because that is who you are now. That is what a real decision does. It replaces identity. You no longer identify as the man who wants to build something. You become the builder. You no longer identify as the woman who wants to change. You become the changed. That's the line no one wants to cross, the point of no return. Because on the other side of it, you cannot lie to yourself anymore. You're either doing it, or you're not. There's no room for potential, no room for fantasy, only reality, only effort, only the present moment, repeating itself until the job is done. The Stoics understood this better than anyone. They knew that indecision is a form of suffering. To live in a state of almost is to fracture your soul. It is to stand with one foot in the old world and one in the new, and tear yourself apart in the middle. It is to live as half a person, to be haunted by possibilities instead of anchored in purpose. And yet this is where most people choose to remain. Why? Because choosing is terrifying. Because choosing is loss. Every true decision is also a funeral, a letting go, a death. Of what? Of who you could have been if you had taken the easy path. Of who you could have blamed if it hadn't worked. Of who you used to be before you made the leap. But let this be clear. If you are not willing to die to who you were, you are not ready to become who you could be. That's the hidden price of growth, the one most people aren't willing to pay. And yet, if you're honest with yourself, you already know what needs to be done. You've known for some time. The only thing standing between you and the life you were meant to live is a final decision. A decision made without a back door, without a rescue plan, without a way to explain yourself if it all goes wrong. Because you've already removed that possibility from your mind. That's the shift. You stop wondering, will this work? And you start saying, I'll make it work, or I'll be broken in the process. Not as a victim, not with desperation, but with stillness, with calm. Like the Stoic who walks into hardship not with fear, but with readiness. Because he's already chosen the battle. He's already accepted the pain. And he's already let go of the idea that there's any way out. That is power, not noise, not passion, not speeches, just decision. Quiet, focused, final. So ask yourself, have you really decided? Or are you still testing the waters, hoping the sea will part before you step? Have you really burned the boats? Or are you still checking to see if they're still there, just in case? Have you committed? Or are you still negotiating? Because life will only meet you at the level of your clarity. Money, discipline, legacy, these things do not come to the hesitant. They come to the decided. The world does not reward effort alone. It rewards follow-through. It rewards those who finish, not those who start with good intentions. And finishing begins with one thing: burning the bridges that lead back to who you were. The general knew it. The Stoics lived it. And now it's your turn to walk into that fire. Not to prove anything to anyone, but to become someone you can no longer deny. Because once you decide, really decide, everything else becomes simpler. Not easier, just clearer. You stop asking if you should do the work. You do it. You stop wondering what people think. You act. You stop waiting for certainty. You move forward with purpose. Because the bridges are gone. The ships are ashes. And the only direction left is forward. Money doesn't follow people who wander. It follows those with direction. It follows those who know where they are going. Those who have stopped entertaining every distraction. Those who no longer dilute their focus with things that have nothing to do with the life they're building. Money, real money, is drawn to clarity. And clarity is rare. Most people are not clear. They are conflicted, divided. One foot on the gas, one on the brake. They want freedom, but fear structure. They want wealth, but worship comfort. They want growth, but resist change. They wander, not physically, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually, from one plan to another, from one scheme to another, from one half-built effort to the next. But wandering produces nothing. Not in the long term. Money is not a reward for randomness. It is the fruit of direction, of order, of consistency. Money flows to the individual or the system that eliminates uncertainty and replaces it with value. And you cannot provide value if you are unclear on what you stand for, what you offer, and where you're going. Clarity is the soil. Money is the fruit. But too many people try to grow fruit in chaos. They jump from idea to idea. They drown in options. They remain addicted to the illusion of possibility and avoid the burden of commitment. And then they wonder why nothing sticks, why results are inconsistent, why income comes in waves or not at all. It's simple. Chaos repels capital. Think about it. Would you invest in a business that had no vision, no structure, no process, no discipline? Would you put your money into a venture where the founder kind of knew what they were doing? Of course not. Then why would the world reward you for doing the same? People forget you are your first investor. You invest time, energy, focus, sacrifice. But if you don't even believe in your own clarity, how could anything or anyone align behind you? There is a law in this world, ancient and unspoken. Resources follow resolve. Money follows clarity the way water follows gravity, naturally, silently, inevitably. But that clarity must come from within, not borrowed, not copied, not guessed, but forged. Forged in silence, forged in suffering, forged in the discomfort of choosing one path while killing 10 others. Because that's what clarity demands. Death. The death of distraction. The death of alternative lives. The death of the parts of you that refuse to focus. And people avoid this death because it means saying no to comfort, no to the crowd, no to being everything to everyone. But only by saying no thousands of times can you say yes to what actually matters. And what matters? Direction, alignment, precision. Clarity is when your thoughts, your choices, your habits, your emotions, and your ambitions all point in the same direction. You wake up with purpose, not noise. You stop needing motivation because your mission is stronger than your moods. You stop chasing money because you've become someone money can't ignore. That's what clarity does. It transforms you from a beggar to a builder, from a seeker to a source, from someone asking, "How do I get money?" to someone asking, "How do I create so much value that money must find me?" There's a reason Stoic philosophy begins with the self, because nothing external can be mastered until the internal is ordered. You cannot lead others if you cannot lead yourself. You cannot create wealth if your own house, your own mind, is in disarray. So the Stoics taught mastery of self, mastery of thought, mastery of will. They knew, as Epictetus said, do not seek for events to happen as you want them to, but instead, want them to happen as they do. This is the foundation of clarity. To accept what is, to stop fantasizing about how things should be, and start building with what is in front of you. To stop demanding the world change, and instead align yourself with reality. Because once you do that, once you are no longer resisting the present moment, you can act clearly, effectively, deliberately. And that's when results begin. Because clarity reduces friction. When you are clear, decisions are faster. When you are clear, execution is smoother. When you are clear, there is less mental drag, less internal debate. And that energy, saved from confusion, is redirected toward creation. That's why wealth flows to the focused, not the talented, not the lucky, not the busy, the focused, the ones who know what they want, and more importantly, what they're willing to sacrifice for it. Clarity is sacrifice. You cannot be clear and still cling to everything. You cannot be clear while constantly reacting to noise. You cannot be clear if you change your plan every time it gets uncomfortable. You must choose your values, your goals, your path, and then align everything behind them. This is not rigidity. This is discipline. The Stoic doesn't need life to be easy. He needs life to be real. And once he accepts that, he moves. Not in panic, not in emotion, but in reason. Clarity is reason applied to life. It says, what is within my control? What is not? What matters now? What doesn't? It removes fantasy. It silences drama. It sharpens everything. And in that sharpening, something powerful happens. The world starts to respond. Not because you shouted, not because you manipulated, not because you demanded, but because you became useful. That's the key. Money follows usefulness. Usefulness follows clarity. Clarity follows internal order. So if you want more wealth, Stop looking outside. Start asking, where am I still scattered? Where am I still vague? Where am I still avoiding hard choices? Clean your internal house. Define your values. Choose your mission. Align your habits. Cut what doesn't serve. Then act. Every day, no negotiation. Because money is not attracted to desperation. It is attracted to design. It is attracted to the person who moves with purpose, not panic. To the one who has decided to master themselves, regardless of what happens externally. The Stoic does not build for applause. He builds because it is in his nature to do so. He does not need certainty. He creates structure inside uncertainty. And in doing so, he becomes valuable, not in theory, but in practice. And value, always, finds its way to compensation. So don't chase money. Chase clarity. Chase mastery. Chase alignment. And then watch as the world reorganizes itself around your unshakable center. Outals. A decision is only as strong as the discipline behind it. Without action, sustained, deliberate, and often invisible, a decision is nothing more than a dressed-up fantasy. A performance for the ego. A temporary high that fades the moment resistance enters the room. Anyone can decide something once. But the man who follows through daily, without applause, without comfort, and without visible progress, he is the one who transforms. He is the one who builds. Because decision is a spark, discipline is the fire. Without discipline, your decision is fragile. It can be broken by fatigue, by doubt, by time. But discipline is the force that says, no, I continue. I continue whether I feel like it or not. I continue whether it's working or not. I continue because I said I would. That is power, not the power of noise, but of endurance. Most people confuse intensity with consistency. They make one bold move, one loud declaration, one emotional commitment, and then they wait for the world to respond. When it doesn't, they call it failure. They think they needed more motivation, but what they needed was more discipline. Discipline is not intensity. It's not performance. It's not even passion. It's quiet. It's dull. It's repetitive. It is the willingness to do what must be done, even when the excitement is gone. Especially when the excitement is gone. That's when your real life begins, when it's no longer romantic, when the goal has lost its glamour, when no one is watching and nothing is changing, and still you act. Because this is who you are now. Discipline is not something you do. It's something you become. It shapes your identity by force of habit. Every time you show up, even when you don't wanna, you teach your mind that your commitment is stronger than your emotions. Every time you keep your word, even when it's inconvenient, you train your body that comfort is not the highest goal. Every time you sacrifice what is easy for what is essential, you become the kind of person the world eventually trusts and rewards. But it doesn't happen overnight. It happens in silence, in early mornings, in late nights, in the middle of doubt, fatigue, boredom, and fear. There is no glamour in discipline, just the slow, steady erosion of the part of you that would rather be distracted than dangerous. That's what you're killing, not laziness, but fragmentation. The inner division that keeps you scattered. The Stoics understood this deeply. They weren't just thinkers. They were practitioners. They believed that philosophy meant nothing unless it was embodied, lived, breathed, acted upon. They trained their minds the way warriors trained their bodies, with structure, with intensity, and above all, with repetition. They knew that freedom did not come from indulgence. It came from self-mastery. That's the paradox most people never understand. They chase pleasure. They chase rest. They chase ease. And they think this is freedom, to do what they want, when they want. But that's not freedom. That's enslavement to impulse. The Stoic knew that true freedom is doing what is right, not what is easy. And what is right is rarely convenient. It is rising before the sun to train, even when the body resists. It is reading and reflecting instead of scrolling and escaping. It is saying no to distraction, not once, but 1,000 times. And this is the secret. Discipline isn't something you find. It's something you forge. Every day you act in alignment with your highest self. Even in small ways, you add weight to your inner foundation. You reinforce your resolve. You move further from the weak, reactive version of yourself and closer to who you were meant to be. But it takes time. It takes silence. It takes solitude. Because the work that transforms you is often invisible. No one sees you practicing in the dark. No one praises you for keeping a promise to yourself. No one celebrates the nights you say no to temporary pleasure for long-term purpose. But those are the moments that separate you. That's when your character is carved. Not in public, but in private. That's where discipline lives. It's not a feeling. It's a system. It's the structure you build to make success inevitable, not just possible. And it begins with the smallest things. What time you wake up, what you feed your body, how you speak to yourself, what you choose to consume, information, energy, emotion. These are not minor details. These are the bricks that build your future. Because nothing reveals your trajectory more than your daily habits. People say they want to be great. They say they want wealth. They say they want freedom. But then you look at their routines, and they don't align. And that's all discipline is, alignment in action. It's your outer behavior reflecting your inner commitment. And if there's a gap between what you say you want and what you do each day, that's not a failure of motivation. That's a failure of discipline. And discipline must be cultivated. You cultivate it by keeping promises to yourself, no matter how small. You say, I will write for 10 minutes today. And you do. You say, I won't check my phone first thing in the morning. And you don't. You say, I will sit in discomfort instead of numbing myself. And you stay. Each of these is a victory. Not because they're impressive, but because they are foundational. Brick by brick, they build the architecture of your future. You don't need more ambition. You don't need more information. You need more execution. Disciplined, deliberate, unshakable execution. Because results don't follow emotion. They follow systems. And systems require structure. The Stoic lived by structure. He knew that his habits, not his moods, determined his character. He didn't ask, do I feel like it today? He asked, is this in alignment with who I've chosen to become? And then he acted, not for applause, not for outcome, but for integrity. That's what discipline really is. It's not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming whole. A person whose actions and values are not at war. A person whose behavior is governed not by impulse, but by intention. A person who no longer chases the highs of early motivation, but finds meaning in the discipline itself. That's the shift. You stop needing results to feel fulfilled. You begin to find fulfillment in the act of showing up, especially when it's hard. And eventually, results come. They always do. Because consistency compounds. And the world respects structure. Money respects it. Opportunity respects it. Even time respects it. The disciplined man bends time in his favor. He turns days into progress. He turns hours into value. He turns weeks into foundations the world can stand on. And it all begins with a single, quiet decision. I will act. Today. Without excuse. Without drama. Without negotiation. And then you do it again. And again. And again. Not because you feel like it. But because this is what you've chosen. Because this is what it means to be free. To master yourself. To command your energy. To act on principle, not preference. This is what builds wealth. This is what builds power. This is what builds a life you don't need to escape from. So stop searching for the perfect system. Start becoming the system. And let your discipline speak louder than your desires ever could. You act, not for reward, but because it is right. This is the essence of inner strength. To move without needing applause. To build without needing recognition. To give your full effort. Even when the outcome is uncertain. Even when no one is watching. This is the kind of character that lasts. The kind that doesn't crumble when results are delayed or denied. Because it is not built on outcome. It is built on purpose. The Stoics had a word for this. Virtue. To act rightly. For the sake of the action itself. To speak truth because it is true. To keep your word because it is your word. To follow your path not because it is profitable, but because it is yours. Most people don't live this way. They chase outcomes. They chase results. They chase approval, likes, followers, money. And when they don't get it, they stop. They say, it's not working. But what they mean is, I'm not getting what I want fast enough. And so they quit, or they pivot, or they water down the work to get attention. But a Stoic doesn't play that game. He knows, deeply, that the outcome is never his to own. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Marcus Aurelius. There is no clearer truth than this. You do not control the market. You do not control the timing. You do not control who listens, who buys, who follows. You control the effort. You control the attention. You control your standards, your consistency, your focus. And that is more than enough. Because when you let go of the outcome, you finally start to move freely. Without fear, without pressure, without desperation. You stop asking, "What will I get?" and start asking, "What is required of me today?" You stop being driven by reward and become governed by reason. This is where real work begins, where ego dies and purpose takes over. Because you're no longer tied to what comes next. You're anchored to who you are becoming in the process. That shift is everything. Because when you are obsessed with results, your energy becomes erratic. You look for shortcuts. You second-guess. You compare yourself to others. You get seduced by urgency and pulled off course by doubt. But when you let go of the outcome and anchor yourself in the discipline of effort, you become unshakable. You work with clarity. You train with intent. You build with integrity. And results, they come. Not because you chase them, but because you earn them, slowly, steadily, without needing them to define you. That's the key. You don't chase money. You build something worthy of it. You build skills. You build systems. You build a reputation that speaks louder than your words ever could. And then, eventually, the world takes notice. Not because you begged, not because you shouted, but because you became valuable. People want the fruit, but they avoid the root. They want the reward, but not the refinement. They want the outcome, but not the ownership of what it takes to be the kind of person who deserves it. But here's the truth. Outcomes don't define you. The effort does. Results can be delayed. They can be denied. They can be manipulated or misunderstood. But your discipline, your process, your intention, that is yours forever. No one can take that from you. And that's why it's the only thing worth measuring. Every day, ask yourself, did I do the work? Did I show up fully? Did I act with integrity? If the answer is yes, you win. Even if the numbers don't reflect it yet. Even if the recognition hasn't come. Even if the money is still catching up. You win because you're becoming someone no outcome can control. That's the Stoic path. Not passive, not indifferent, but disciplined, detached. You care deeply about what you do, but you are not owned by what it brings you. That's freedom. Because the moment you stop acting for results, you start acting from alignment, from clarity, from strength. You're no longer negotiating with life. You're no longer asking the world to validate your effort. You're rooted in your values, rooted in your process, rooted in something deeper than applause. You can't fake this. You can't borrow it. You have to live it. You have to live with the discomfort of doing the right thing, even when it feels invisible. You have to embrace the silence between the work and the reward. You have to let go of needing the outcome to prove anything to anyone, even yourself. Because that's what real strength looks like. To do your best work, even when it seems like no one cares. To take the next step, even when the last one didn't go as planned. To hold the line, even when everything in you wants to let go. That's discipline. That's self-mastery. That's how character is carved. And it's in those quiet moments, the ones no one else sees, that greatness begins. Because eventually, everything catches up. Your work compounds. Your skills evolve. Your clarity sharpens. And the world starts to respond. Not always when you expect. Not always how you imagined. But it does. Not because you chased the outcome, but because you became the kind of person it couldn't ignore. So be patient. Be relentless. Be precise. And above all, be detached. You are not owed anything. You are not entitled to the harvest just because you planted seeds. But if you tend the ground every day, rain or shine, doubt or confidence, the harvest comes. It always does. And when it does, you won't be surprised. You won't be shocked. Because you'll know, deeply, that you earned it. Not just by what you did, but by who you became while doing it. That is the only outcome that matters. The only one you truly control. So build, refine, sacrifice, let go. Let go of the timeline. Let go of the noise. Let go of the part of you that still thinks success is a finish line. There is no finish line. Only today. Only now. And what you do with it. You act, not for reward, but because it is right. And that, alone, is enough. True wealth is not in your wallet. It's in your will. The world wants you to believe otherwise. It parades numbers, net worths, status symbols. It shouts loud with shiny objects, whispering, "This is success." But a Stoic sees through the noise. He knows that real wealth cannot be measured in digits or things. Because what is given can be taken. What is seen can be broken. What is stored can be stolen. But what is forged inside, that is untouchable. That is true wealth. Not because it looks impressive, but because it lasts. Confidence, clarity, character. These are not decorations. They are foundations. And when these align, truly align, everything else becomes a byproduct. The man with inner wealth does not chase. He builds. He serves. He creates. He moves with purpose. And wealth, if it comes, finds him, not the other way around. Because he does not act out of need, but out of knowing. He knows who he is. He knows what he stands for. He knows what matters and what doesn't. And that makes him dangerous in the best way. Because he cannot be bought. He cannot be bent. He cannot be rushed or rattled or seduced. His wealth is his will, trained, sharpened, unshaken. That's the kind of man the Stoics revered. Not the one who owned the most, but the one who needed the least. Not because he rejected money, but because he understood its place. Money is a tool. Status is a shadow. But virtue, that is the treasure. And it lives in the soul. So you ask, what does it mean to be truly rich? It means waking up with peace, not pressure. It means going to sleep with honor, not regret. It means trusting yourself, not because everything is certain, but because you've proven to yourself that you show up no matter what. That is confidence, not arrogance, not noise, but earned belief. Confidence is the residue of discipline, of promises kept, of storms endured, of days when no one believed in you, except you. That's wealth. Clarity is wealth too. To know what matters. To know where you're going and why. To walk into a room without pretending to be someone else. To speak with simplicity because you no longer need to impress anyone. That is rare. And rare things are valuable. But above all, character is the real currency. Not charm. Not performance. Character. Who you are when no one's watching. How you treat people who can do nothing for you. What you choose when no one will ever find out. That is the substance behind your name. And in a world obsessed with image, substance is power. People will forget your achievements. They'll forget your numbers, your status, your titles. But they'll never forget how you showed up. They'll never forget what it felt like to trust you, or not. And long after the money's gone, long after the praise fades, your character is what will remain. So build that first. Make that your treasure. Because when that's strong, everything else aligns. You start to attract, not chase. You start to influence, not persuade. You start to feel rich, not because you have, but because you are. Grounded, clear, whole. That's a kind of wealth no crash can touch. No market can erase. No thief can steal. Because it lives inside. And that's where you should build, from the inside out. Not the other way around. The world teaches the opposite. It says, get money first. Then you'll feel powerful. Then you'll feel respected. Then you'll feel whole. But look around. How many wealthy men live in fear? How many famous people live in shame? How many outwardly successful people are crumbling behind the curtain? Because they skipped the inner work. They built the house before they poured the foundation. They chased the crown without earning the kingdom. They won the applause, but lost their soul. The Stoic is not fooled. He knows that inner wealth is the only wealth that scales. It multiplies not through acquisition, but through alignment. Every time you act in harmony with your values, you grow. Every time you keep your word, you grow. Every time you choose discomfort over dishonor, you grow. And eventually, you become someone even you respect. That's wealth. Self-respect. Not the kind that comes from success, but the kind that survives failure. Because you know what you're made of. You've tested yourself. You've seen yourself fall and get back up. You've seen yourself tempted and say no. You've seen yourself ignored and kept going. That's when you know you're rich. When silence doesn't scare you anymore. When solitude feels like fuel. When you don't need the world's permission to move. Because you have your own. You are sovereign. And that is the highest form of wealth. To be the ruler of your own mind. To be free from envy, fear, approval, noise. To walk through chaos and remain still inside. This is not poetic. It is practical. Because a grounded man makes better decisions. He invests wiser. He leads stronger. He creates clearer. And that's what money respects, stability. Money does not respect desperation. It does not stay with the anxious. It does not grow in chaos. It flows to the builder, the steady hand, the clear mind, the patient spirit, the man who is rich inside, because he doesn't collapse under pressure. He doesn't gamble his values for a quick win. He doesn't panic when things go quiet. He stays the course. And eventually, the world catches up. That's the paradox. When you stop needing money to feel powerful, you become powerful enough to earn money without losing yourself. When you stop craving the prize, you become focused enough to win it, not through noise, but through depth. Because depth is rare, and what is rare becomes valuable. So stop asking, how can I make more? Start asking, how can I become more? Not more impressive, but more integrated. Not more admired, but more anchored. Not more comfortable, but more capable. And then build. Build your mind. Build your will. Build your inner house so solid that no external storm can shake it. That's the man the Stoics aim to become. Not the wealthiest, the strongest, the clearest, the most resilient, the most free. Because at the end of the day, riches fade, bodies age, markets turn, titles disappear. But your will? That's eternal. So sharpen it, harden it, refine it, and you'll never be poor again. Even if the world says otherwise. You don't need more time. You need to decide. That's it. This is the moment. Not later. Not when it's convenient. Not when the fear goes away. Not when you feel more confident. Now. That's what it means to live with strength. To stop stalling. To stop overthinking. To stop asking the world for permission to begin. You already know what needs to be done. You already feel it. That pull inside you. The one that won't go away. The one that whispers in quiet moments and screams when you're alone. The one that says, you were made for more than this. And still you wait. You wait for the stars to align. You wait for motivation. You wait for the right words, the right mood, the right weather. But the Stoic knows better. He doesn't wait. He decides. Because time doesn't wait. Life doesn't wait. And every day you delay, you weaken the muscle of your will. You train your mind to doubt itself. You send the message, I am not ready. But readiness is not a feeling. It is a decision. You become ready by stepping in, not by standing back. And so I'll say it again. You don't need more time. You need to decide. Right now, to stop drifting. To stop scrolling. To stop asking what it would look like if you tried. And instead, start trying. You don't need a full plan. You don't need perfect clarity. You just need to take one step. One honest, hard, undeniable step. Today. Not tomorrow. Not after this video. Now. Write it down. What matters? What you want to build. What you're no longer willing to tolerate. Get it out of your head. Put it in front of you. Make it real. Because until you name it, it owns you. And when you name it, you reclaim your power. Second, remove distractions. Not all of them forever. Just enough to give your mind back to yourself. Turn off the noise. Silence the voices that fill your time, but not your soul. Say no to the dopamine traps that steal your hours and leave you empty. Because clarity doesn't come from more input. It comes from less. From quiet. From solitude. From facing the resistance you've been avoiding. And that's where the third step comes in. Take action. Not tomorrow. Not when it's easier. Now. Send the email. Start the business. End the habit. Make the call. Lift the weight. Speak the truth. Do the hard thing you know you've been avoiding. And do it with full presence. You don't have to feel ready. You have to be honest. You have to move. Because motion is power. And without motion, intention is just air. This is what the Stoics meant when they talked about virtue. Not thoughts. Not talk. But embodied discipline. They didn't admire clever words. They admired strong wills. They didn't admire people who waited. They admired those who decided. You say you want freedom? Here it is. Freedom is the power to act rightly, regardless of how you feel. To do what must be done, even when no one is clapping, even when fear is louder than faith, even when your hands shake. That's freedom. That's strength. That's the man or woman you were made to become. But you cannot get there by thinking about it. You must live it. You must take ownership of your time, your mind, your direction. You must stop outsourcing your life to excuses and distractions. You must stop treating your calling like a hobby. Because this is it. This is the hour. This is the window. This is the only time you have, because no one is promised tomorrow. The Stoics knew this well. They wrote about death constantly, not as something to fear, but as a reason to live fully now. They reminded themselves, you could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do, say, and think. Marcus Aurelius. So ask yourself, if this was the last year of your life, would you keep living the way you're living? Would you keep making the same excuses? Would you keep postponing the work that matters most? Would you keep tolerating the things that drain your soul? Or would you move? Would you decide? Would you finally act like your life belongs to you? Because it does. It always has. You just forgot. You let fear talk you down. You let noise numb your instincts. You let failure convince you that hesitation is safer than action. But it's not. Hesitation kills more dreams than failure ever could. And you're not here to hesitate. You're here to build, to move, to become. So stop waiting. Stop explaining. Stop watching from the sidelines. This is your moment. One decision, one commitment, one step, taken with everything you've got. Not halfway. Not when it feels right. Now. And if that voice in your head tries to resist, remind it. You don't need permission. You don't need a guarantee. You don't need applause. You need to move. Because decision is the beginning of everything. Not luck. Not talent. Not timing. Decision. And you, yes you, are capable of it. You've already waited long enough. Now it's time to act. To embody what you know to be true. To stop speaking your philosophy and live it. Let this be the day you chose to stop watching and start building. Let this be the day your will overpowered your weakness. Let this be the day your life turned. Not because the world changed, but because you did. Because you decided. And nothing is stronger than a mind made up. So go. Write it down. Remove the distractions. Take one step today. And remember, don't explain your philosophy. Embody it. Epictetus.